Alright guys, so this is a Q&A video, part 2. I put up a question sticker a little while ago, and I'm getting back to you guys with your answers. I'm going to try and be as concise as possible, as much as that's difficult for me. And we're going to get going. Alright, first question. Rowan Barkey. Substitute for leg press if the gym has a horrible one. Well, it's a little bit unfortunate, but what you can do is anything that is similar to that pattern, and really a leg press is just a regressed in skill and internal stability squat. It reduces your range of motion, it reduces the amount of free movement that you have to control, but it really is essentially a squat-like pattern. And so you can replace that with another movement that actually is a squat-like pattern. If you have a hack, if you have another squat-type machine, or you have, well, everyone has barbells really, Smith machines and specialty bars, that you could do any one of those as a squatting pattern. And you can replace, not perfectly one-to-one, the amount of work volume that you could do with a leg press with one of those movements, but that would be your best option. Put in where you would have a leg press a squat-like pattern, and then just adjust to how much you can actually perform and recover from within those sessions with having that versus a leg press in. All right. Next question from, Jackson and Keevil. Best way to treat shoulder rotator cuff issues in pressing and fly movements. Okay, so this is not super specific. Rotator cuff, quote unquote, is not exactly very helpful for asking a question. And that's not to talk down question asker here, but just as relative information goes, if you're going to ask somebody for this type of advice, you're going to want to be a little bit more elaborate with exactly what the issue is. So like your rotator cuff is just a group of muscles that act to stabilize the shoulder at actually directly the top of the humerus, so that it can fight against dislocative forces that want to pull it in any direction outside of the glenohumeral joint. And so being that that's the case, rotator cuff problems with pressing, fly movements, or really anything else, it's not really that helpful as far as like giving you really good advice, because there's a lot of things that could be contributing that may be creating the issues. Also, with scope of practice type things, if you do have a specific issue and you do have severe shoulder pain, or shoulder pain enough that it's inhibiting to your movements on a grand scale, you might want to talk to a physical therapist or somebody that is specifically working in those areas so they can do those deep dives and figure those things out for you specifically. But with a more general take on it, best way to treat shoulder and rotator cuff issues in pressing or fly movements. Usually when you're going to have a problem with the shoulder or rotator cuff on pressing and flies, it's not directly rotator cuff issues. You're just having problems with impingement pains, most often with pressing. And so big things on that is most of the time not really having a stable shoulder for your setup. Most of the time in pressing, you're going to have shoulder issues if I'm laying on a bench here, and as you come down, your shoulders like to elevate and they roll forward as you're coming down into a press. This is very common to have happen. And as you come down in this pattern, rather than being more set in a neutral posture, slightly retracted and depressed, this will be a whole lot better for your pressing path and your control over the shoulder, because it has a solid foundation from the scaps, rather than pressing from here, doing this. And it's the same thing for flies, where most people will end up having pain on flies in their shoulders if they're doing a fly in a flat plane like this, and their shoulders are really pulled forward, or it just doesn't align with the direction that your arm is moving versus the cable, and it's pulling you out of position. And so best things for you to do on pressing specifically is address your shoulders, address where they're positioned when you start and how they're moving throughout. They should be mostly stationary while you're pressing. Slight movement from this retracted, slightly depressed position is going to happen, and that's fine, but you need to be able to set that and establish it first, and then follow a path that's going to be most comfortable for you, which will have to be a little bit varied, but typically staying away from being super abducted is going to be a good idea. Focusing on trying to keep your shoulders out of your ears, no matter what position of the movement you're in. Shoulders out of your ears, elbows track in a direction that's comfortable for you. It may be a little bit closer to you, maybe a little bit more abducted, and that's going to depend on the specific movement, the machine, whether or not it's a machine, dumbbell, barbell, whatever. But it's almost always going to be better for you to be relatively here rather than here, or any sort of permutation that creates this elevated posture or severely abducted arms without control of where your shoulder moves. Next question from 7KILR. Can someone with extremely low T who started a test-only cycle, parentheses Sustanon, take longer for the cycle to work or kick in? So with low testosterone already at baseline, that's not really going to prolong the time it'll take for a cycle to quote-unquote kick in. Your concentrations are going to rise by putting in exogenous hormones at the rate that they're actually going to be cleaving off of the esters that they're attached to, which is going to be pretty standard across all people. So whether or not you're in a normal test level or your low T isn't really going to change whether or not you're going to have a shorter or longer period of time before you notice it kick in. But this is really the thing that I want to get to more than anything with a question like this, is that for cycles with really any drug that you're going to be utilizing for bodybuilding in a safer use model, you're not going to have a kick in. Like, you're not going to feel it. It's not something that you're just going to have one day. You're just like, wow, this is really different. I've really changed. I have all of this power, this energy, and I'm this aggressive, and numbers just start moving like crazy, and you added 100 pounds to this lift and that lift. That's not how it works. So you're not really going to notice it. It's not like you taking a giant amount of caffeine and you're just hyped off the walls. It doesn't work like that. You're going to start to feel the effects, certainly, but it's not going to be something that feels like a more proximally active supplement, like something like caffeine or a stimulant or something like that would be, or like another anabolic that is not going to be within a safe use model framework. Like, I don't know, to make an example, anything that's in a suspension that is really not attached to any esters, those will kick in like that, and you will feel that. Orals that are very, they're immediately useful within a very short time period, within hours, you may feel those as well, depending on what they are. But on normal, long-term injectables, you're not really going to feel anything. You're going to be able to look back and see that things have changed, and really that's what you're going to notice rather than having anything kick in. Okay, next question from Spencer Sivko. Do you think it is beneficial to be a part of a team versus pursuing bodybuilding on your own, and why? Yes, I think it is extremely beneficial to be a part of a team rather than it being a purely individual pursuit. Bodybuilding is a very, very individual endeavor, and it can be very lonely. It can be something that alienates you from people that aren't outside of it, other people in your life that are outside of bodybuilding that don't really understand the passion of it. People like, any friends that you have, family that you have that haven't followed into the passion that you have at all, or friends that you had before you fell into it, family members that obviously were around in your life before you fell into it that aren't going to understand. It can be very, very isolating. And most people that do end up in bodybuilding generally feel this way. where you're pretty much on your own doing everything that you have to do to be successful in it. And the people that would have supported you in most any other thing are generally pretty skeptical of the reasons why you're doing this, because it conflicts with a lot of their own personal values, and some of their projections come out after you start pursuing something like this. Like family members and friends that don't understand are going to question you on maybe why you don't drink anymore, or if at all. They're going to really question you if like you start not showing up to the random call out to the club or out to hang out at whoever's house at a random notice at 10 p.m. To stay up until 3 in the morning. You're not going to be partying on the weekends. You're not going to be, just eating whatever you want whenever you like to. You're going to be waking up at a specific time. You're going to be doing cardio, your steps, your training, doing all these things in an extremely regimented manner where most people in general don't care about exercising in general in the first place. They don't really care about their daily structure aside from getting to their work and doing their job and then spending the rest of their time however they like to, in whatever fashion that is. People are going to not understand why you put yourself through things that they couldn't personally do. And so it's going to alienate you pretty hard from most people that would be in your life otherwise. And so this is actually pretty relevant to the time that I'm recording this specific video, even though it's not going to be released exactly at that time. This is actually immediately following the Team Gloff meetup weekend, where a big group of my guys that I've been coaching for between 6 months and 2 years plus have come out down here to meet me for the first time, handful of them at least, for the first time, and meet each other on the team, where I, in a kind of unique way in the bodybuilding world, I set up my coaching where it's not just a singular communication between myself and the client. I have those individual communication with those people so I can do my coaching effectively. But with every single one of my clients, I place them into a open team group chat where every single one of my active clients sits. And I pretty much let them be and do their thing. I moderate, but they end up, coming across each other. They post in their wins, their losses, troubles. They ask questions. They talk up all of the cool things that are happening in their lives. They joke around, and they just make friends with each other. And in this experiment that I've ran over the last few years of having this, that plus every weekend I do a 2-hour open Q&A where anybody in the team can come in and join and ask questions or just talk with one another and talk with me. That has built such a strong connection between the people on my team that really participate that I can never look at bodybuilding as a singular pursuit on an individual level anymore. I don't think that it's viable really for a lot of people. It takes a lot out of you. It's very difficult. It can be very alienating. And we all have a lot of the same little neuroses and things that we need to do in our daily lives that we all understand that most of the world outside of us doesn't. So being in, a room or being in a virtual room, being connected with all of these other people that share a lot of the same things with you and generally self-select into being in the same circles because of the way that you like to interact with people, hence why they're coaching with me. A lot of them think alike. A lot of people in this industry do think alike. And if you can find an easy way to push yourself into those circles and become one with the rest of the people that do this and care, there's no better friendships that you're going to find, really, than those people that really get it and understand. So that's the long answer to this. But being that it's really fresh in my mind, I feel it's really necessary to give a long answer to this question, because I can't imagine really doing bodybuilding to its fullest and really enjoying it to the fullest if it's a purely individual pursuit. If you have a team, it's going to be infinitely more fulfilling. All right. Next question from Gonzalo Barrio, one of my guys on the team. Where do you see the Team Gloff in 2 years. Where I see this team going is obviously with the bedrock of the guys that I already have, well, guys and gals that I have on the team. I see all of them progressing beyond where they already are infinitely, and in a way that I can't really quantify exactly by sitting here and trying to go through each one of them. There's so much potential with the guys and girls on my team right now. And I've had the unique pleasure of being able to start from the bottom with a lot of my people, where I haven't fallen into the position where I have a lot of really high level athletes right off the rip that are coming to me for help, that are trying to, from high national level to make it to the pro card, or from actually pros trying to continue to improve as pros. I have a lot of guys that have come to me from really no start already, just kind of casual training and not really far along in their overall development, that wanted to really take it to the next level. And that's really the MO of the majority of the people that have come to me, with some exceptions. But with all of those people coming in that way, we've had the opportunity to really grow and develop from the base foundations, every little piece of the process and the structure that is going to build them and has built them significantly into incredible athletes that I'm so incredibly proud of being able to bring them through that process to get to this point. And in 2 to 3 years, after a little bit more time, giving them the opportunity to continue to build on those foundations, I know for a fact that there's going to be a big reckoning on Team Gloff, and a lot of these guys that have been putting in the work for years are going to make some names for themselves, and I'm really, really excited to see that. That's really the biggest thing that I could say for Team Gloff in itself in the next 2 to 3 years as it progresses. Things are coming. All right, next question from Jared Fred. Best way to bring in core midsection. So it kind of depends on what you mean by bring in core and midsection. If you're referring to it as how you get it to come in from a fat loss perspective, really that's just a general thing. You're going to have to lose overall body fat for you to bring in your core midsection. So that's not really something that you could do a specific movement or movements that are going to target like isolated fat loss in that area. That's not how that works. So you're going to need to just get general fat loss to bring in your core midsection. If you're referring to less fat loss as you are just the general appearance because of a lack of abdominal control, and thus having just your overall midsection be expanded and wider and distended, best ways to do that is to look at your digestion, the volume of food that you're eating, and whether or not you can actually tolerate those things long term, what you're doing to actually manage them, and also during the times where you're going to be having the most food in, the highest volume that you're taking in as well, still working on making sure that you're getting some sort of core midsection work and practice at drawing in and controlling the musculature of the midsection. Because if you're in prolonged surplus off-season phases, you're going to have high food. Bringing down the overall volume of food by not having foods that are really, voluminous but not containing a lot of calories is going to be less and less of a good idea as that continues on and food amounts get higher. Having really high amounts of food is going to distend your stomach a bit. Having that chronically is going to create bigger issues for you retaining the ability to control muscularly your midsection. And so that's a little bit of a double-edged sword there. And obviously really high food, really long periods of time, not being controlled, you're going to have higher body fat. So that's both of the problems in the same place. So really best way to bring in your core midsection from a fat loss perspective, already covered. From a muscular perspective, make sure that your digestion is good, your food selections and food volumes are accurate to your needs so that you don't have a consistent amount of distension at all times, or most of the time for that matter. And to make sure that you're always consistently off season or dieting or competition season, you're actually doing some active work, practicing holding in your midsection so that you can get some practice using the deep musculature of the abdomen that will actually draw everything in for you and create that smaller waist core look. Next question from Mariano Fernandez. I can't progress on cuff lateral raises. Any idea? Yeah, for smaller muscle groups like this, you adding more load or adding more reps done is going to be difficult because they are small muscle groups and the amount of force that they can produce within a movement when they're isolated is quite small. And so with that being the case, the addition of another 5 pounds or 10 pounds or whatever increment you have available. So for specifically cuff laterals, you're working on a cable stack. Cable stack goes, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, most cases. That 10-pound jump is going to be a lot of load added relative to what you're actually able to do with that muscle group within a set. And so if you can get 10, 15 reps with 20 pounds on that cable stack, you bring it up to 30, the next weight increment, and you might be like doing a full body effort to try and get it to happen for a couple reps. So that's not something that's uncommon. That's very, very normal to happen. And so these movements are more about trying to maintain quality and continue to put in the work and increase overall volumes over time so that you can continue to edge up just little bits in load, little bits in rep volume, and continuing to progress on them that way over time by just being consistent on them. Trying to push on load and volume like you would on a squat or a leg press or a deadlift type, a hinge, or any other movements like that that have a lot of muscle groups that are doing, the same thing, trying to aggregate all of their force to help you move in one aggregate motion. Those have a lot more vertical progression ability on being able to do that. Small, isolated patterns like this are not going to have that same ability to progress. So you shouldn't be thinking of them or treating them in the same way that you would on those movements. Next question from Hazik. Is standing cable press the same as seated? No. So I don't really have much context for this, but doing really any pressing, I would assume, because it's not described, bilateral pressing on a cable would be, I don't know, overhead, flat, decline, whatever angle it really is. Standing is not going to be the same as seated. It just isn't. For one major reason, and I'll leave it at one major reason, you're not being externally stabilized by anything. And so the cables are going to be pulling you into the machine at whatever direction that the cables are pulling at. And if you don't have something that anchors you in place, having a bench that is going to keep you from sliding across the floor into the cable stack, that's going to be a big difference. You're going to be throttled on loading pretty significantly. Your ability to progress is going to be pretty hampered. Your setup is going to be a little bit more elaborate with how you have to control all of the parts if you're standing rather than seated. And it's just the requirements for it are not really aligning to what the goal to have that movement in for hypertrophy would be. And the goal would be to generally isolate the amount of moving parts down to what is actually necessary so that you can get the most loading and overall volume done with it with the most quality so you can actually hit the target muscle effectively with the movement. Standing is not really going to be effective for that. Standing could be effective for more functional purpose if that's really something that you're looking at, but that's going to be on a specific case-by-case basis on whether or not you need that in your programming anyway. And in general, for the goal of hypertrophy, it's not really on the table for that goal. So I would throw that out, go with seated, and adjust accordingly within your programming for that. All right, so from GV Javi, Javier, I see you. I like what you're doing with your brand. Keep it up, man. Goat emoji. Thanks, dude. I really appreciate it. All right, guys, so that wraps up part 2 of the Q&A segment for this batch of questions. Let me know in the comment section what you think about my answers to the questions, what kind of content you would like to see in the future, what you'd like to see some more of. If you like the video, like the video. If you like the video, share the video with some of your friends. If you like the video, subscribe so that you can see more of them. Comment below any and anything that you want to see here. I'll talk to you next time.